Hi, I'm Scott with Chief Architect. In this video I'm going to cover the process of creating an accessible kitchen that meets the National Kitchen and Bath Association's accessibility guidelines. The ADA covers commercial guidelines but not really for residential guidelines, so therefore I'm using those available from the NKBA. There are three important areas for this kitchen that I'm going to focus on. First is knee clearance for both the sink and the cook range. And then next is creating a wide aisle with a turning radius. Let's get started with a new plan. Now that I have a new plan open, let's review a few of my settings here. First of all, I'm using the NKBA annotations available through the drop-down. Next, I'm using the layer set for kitchen and bath. And finally, I'm using my saved plan view for kitchen and bath. And really the saved plan view that ships out of the box of the program controls both your layer set and your annotation set. So let's get started by using our exterior wall tool. I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to create the shape of our design. I'm just going to right click and create a rectangular room. You'll notice the wall fill layer is turned off in the kitchen and bath layer set. Once I'm finished, I'm going to go ahead and select inside of this room, and notice in my lower edit menu down here at the bottom there is a feature called the automatic NKBA dimension tool. Now these dimensions are going wall surface to wall surface, and I'm going to select one of the walls on the side here. I'm going to highlight the lower dimension and I'm going to type in 256 for inches, and then I'm going to come over here and select the lower wall and I'm going to select this dimension and I'm going to put in 203. Once I have my dimensions in place, I'll just simply refresh my dimensions by using that same tool, and now I kind of have the space that I want. You could take a 3D view and let's take a peek. When you take a 3D view, these are going to be using the defaults you've set up for your plan. Notice that the exterior wall type is of a certain color, certain style, as is my interior floor coloring and walls. I'm going to go ahead and place my doors and windows while I'm in this view. Let's place a window off to the side over here. I'm going to place one for our sink right in this area. One more off to the side over here. And then finally I'm going to place a door back in this back wall. We'll just use our door tool. I'm going to click and place the door, and I'm going to make this a little bit wider at maybe 60 inches. And now I'm going to return back to the plan view and let's finalize our dimensions for those objects. The window on the lower wall is going to be our sink window. I'm going to go ahead and make some adjustments to the width and the height. So I'm going to set this to be 48 by 54. Once I have that adjustment, I'm going to go ahead and select inside the room, update those dimensions. Next, I'm just going to kind of move my way around in a circular fashion and update the dimensions for each one of these objects. So I'm going to click on the window and then I'm going to put in the value for the dimension, and I'm just going to kind of work my way around. For this dimension, I'm going to set this to be 51 3/8, and for the door I'm going to set this to be 40 inches from the window. And finally, for this window over here, I'm going to set that to be 9 inches. So I have most of the dimensions for the room. One of the things that I like to do if you're just going to be doing one wall or maybe two walls is I'm going to temporarily create a view in here. I'm going to use the break wall. You'll see this in the upper menu. I'm just going to create a notch somewhere along in this wall right in here, and then I'm going to select these two walls and I'm going to mark them as invisible. That way when I take a 3D view you won't see those two walls, and it makes it very easy to look inside the design. Let's go back to the 3D view here. And now in the 3D view you can see this space, and we can kind of zoom right in and begin our design work. Now I'm going to begin the design work in this perspective view. A lot of times I'll work in a plan view and elevation view, but this one's an easy way to start the process. And I'm going to begin with placing a full height cabinet, and I'm just going to place this right in this area right here, and I'm going to slide it right up against the wall until it bumps. Next I'm going to double click on that and I'm going to make some modifications in the cabinet. On the general panel, what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark the width of this to be 21 inches. Press the tab key so you can see it update. Then on the front of the cabinet I'm going to click on the lower face item. I'm going to change this from a door to an opening. And then on the upper door, let's go ahead and change that from a auto right to an auto left. And then I'm going to set the item height to 34.5 inches. That way it's going to line up the bottom of it here with a few of the wall cabinets that I place here in a minute. Just go ahead and bump that back against the wall. I'm going to place one more full height cabinet that will be used for our double oven. Go ahead and click on that. I'm going to resize it to 30 inches. And on this cabinet I want to go ahead and make a few changes. First of all, I'm going to change the upper drawers. Let's go ahead and set this to be a dimension of 23 7/8. Press the tab key so you get a preview. On this lower face item, I'm going to go ahead and split this horizontally, and the center one, I'm going to mark this as an appliance. Let's go ahead and change that. And then on the item height, I'm going to put in the specs for the specific appliance. These are the finished dimensions typically. Also make sure that you lock this from resize, because we do not enforce any of the settings for specific appliances, so it's your responsibility to make sure you use the spec sheet and use the finished dimensions for this. On the item above it, the separation, I'm going to change that to a blank area, and then I'm going to set that to be 3 inches. And then finally on the lower section down here at the very bottom, I'm also going to make that a blank area as well. And then really there's no reason for the separation in this area or the separation in this area, so we'll just simply remove those. On the appliance, I'm going to come down, I'm going to browse out to the library, and I'm going to look for the Wolf Double Oven that I'm after. So I'll just scroll down, look for the Wolf catalog. So let's scroll down a little bit further. That should be under the Wolf Cooking section for ovens, and I'm going to use this built-in double oven, and now you can see the preview. Now the next cabinet that I want to place is going to be a base cabinet, so let's go back into the menu. We'll choose our base cabinet, and I'm going to just place the 24-inch cabinet in here, and this is going to be a pull-out for our trash container. Let's go ahead and open this up, and what I want to do in this case is just simply click on the drawer, press delete, and with this pull-out, let's go ahead and change that to a drawer. So I'm going to choose the drawer option in here. When you do this, let's go ahead and close the dialog. Notice that it's going to use the slab style drawer that we have as our default. So I want this to be a face frame. If I were to place one more cabinet over here, I want it to have the face frame style of the door itself, but I want to be able to show this open as a drawer. So in this case, what I'm going to do is let's just open this cabinet up and make the changes. So on the drawer component down here, I'm going to come down to the specify for the door and drawer, and I'm just using a simple frame drawer. Let's go ahead and choose that option in here, and now you'll see the hardware in here. I need to move that up. So I'm going to change that vertical position. Let's see if we can move that down maybe 1.5 inches or so and see what it looks like in the preview. Again, I typically press the tab key so you can see what that preview looks like, and I'm going to go ahead and close the dialog now. So now one more setting. Let's go ahead and click on the cabinet. You can open that drawer down here in the lower edit menu. You see open cabinet doors. And now we can kind of rotate around. What I want to do in this case is I want to insert a trash pull-out from the Rev-A-Shelf catalog. So let's go back into that cabinet and make that change. So I'm going to go ahead and select the drawer. By the way, if you want to change the percent open, let's just change that to 25%. You can rotate around in the dialog and you can kind of see the way that's going to look. Maybe we'll increase it to maybe 40%. Let's go back into the specify option. And down here at the bottom, I'm going to choose the library option and go into the Rev-A-Shelf catalog. So as we come down, you find the Rev-A-Shelf catalog, and I happen to know the part number. I'm going to just type it in up here in the search criteria 5349, and then I'm just going to scroll down. It gives me a list of a handful of these, and I'm going to choose the one that I'm after here. See the preview of it. Let's go ahead and close the dialog, and again it will replace inside of the box, and then when you close the dialog, you can now see that trash container being open in that area. Now the next cabinet we're going to place is going to be our sink base, and I'm going to make that actually a separate video. If I were to reserve a space in here of 36 inches for that cabinet, I'm going to open up the library and place my cabinet in this space here in just a second. Let's place our dishwasher cabinet off to the side, and I'm just going to come back in here and I'm going to delete the sink base. Alright, now I'm going to open up the library and I'm going to grab this accessibility sink. Now I've created this and I'm going to show you how to create this in a separate video, but you can kind of see the profile of this if I zoom in a little bit. What this does is it allows you to have 27 inches of space for your knees, and then there's an access panel for the plumbing fixtures, and then your feet actually have room with a wheelchair to be able to get right underneath of here. And if you look at the details here, again, this just kind of reiterates what I just covered. But this is a section view of that sink, and I'm going to do a specific video on how to create a sink that will look like this. And then what I've done here for this video is I blocked that particular object, added it into my accessibility folder, and then I can reuse this and make modifications to it as I need to for future designs and or videos. So I'm actually going to place this sink in my plan view. Let's return back. I'm going to grab that sink, and I'm going to place it right in this area right in here. Now in Chief Architect, that's called an architectural block, which consists of the sink, the cabinet, and maybe a few other components that I've used on the lower section of this. A lot of times what I want to do is unblock those so I can get more accurate dimensions down to those component levels. So I'm going to click on this tool in the lower edit menu. It looks like an explode block button, and now that becomes individual items. I'll just pull it out and rebump that and slide it up against the wall. And while we're in the library, let's go ahead and find our dishwasher. I have a favorites folder in my kitchen short list. A lot of times I'll work that way with my favorites, and I'll replace the box with the dishwasher over here. Next, let's go back into the 3D and finish up in the kitchen. I'm going to place a cabinet on the other side of the dishwasher, and I want to make this a 3-drawer bank cabinet. The easiest way to do that is to select on the front of this face item, change that to a drawer, and then I'm going to use the split horizontal feature, and if you need to worry about the sizing, you can click on each one of those face items. Next, I'm going to grab the partition for the refrigerator, and I'm going to slide a partition in here. Let's go ahead and slide our view over just a little bit. We'll bump this partition against the cabinet. Something you may want to do if you look at this cabinet is to trim off the countertop edge. If you're going to do a countertop plan, let's go ahead and trim that countertop off the side over here. If we rotate around on that cabinet, you can see the side we're after. And you'll find that setting under the general panel underneath your countertop. You can select uniform, and maybe I'll set this to be 0 on both the left and the right specifically, and then you'll see that trim off in the side. Now I can grab that partition and we'll just slide it over and bump it into place. Now let's make one change to the partition. I want to set this to be 1.5 inches, and I'll have to rebump it then. And let's just go ahead and slide it over and bump it into place now that it's 1.5 inches. And then we'll zoom out, and I'm just going to grab one more copy of that using the copy command. We'll just slide that over here, and then I'm going to grab a refrigerator out of the library, and we'll place our refrigerator in here, and then we'll bump the refrigerator against both of the partitions. And then the final thing with the base and full height cabinets, I'm going to grab this cabinet clear off to the right. Let's create a copy of it, and I'm going to paste one over in this area, and then I'll just bump that over, and then I'm also going to change the door to be the other hinge side. So we'll just change that from an auto left to an auto right. Okay, next let's go ahead and close our library browser down, and what we need to do now is place a few of the wall cabinets. So let's just grab our wall cabinet tool. I'm going to place a wall cabinet on this side. I'm just going to resize this to about 9 inches, and then we'll grab, I want to make sure that the space in between the casing and the wall is exactly the same. And based on that gap, we can probably make that 12 inches. And again, whatever this dimension is when we do our wall elevation, I like to use the copy in the lower edit menu, and then the reflect about, which you'll see in the lower edit menu. And then we can come into the window or the sink, and then that's going to give us the exact same space along with that window reveal. Let's go ahead and bump this over to the partition, and then the final thing is to place a wall cabinet above the refrigerator. Let's grab our wall cabinet, and again, this is a little bit tough to do because it's impeding in the refrigerator, but we'll just click and place it. It's going to give you a message saying it's going to conflict. We'll go ahead and ignore that. And what I want to do is I want to bump that to each side over here, and then we'll go in and make some modifications to this cabinet. Let's go ahead and pull it down. And if you're ever curious, you can open up the adjacent cabinet, and on the general panel it says finished floor to top is 90 inches. So let's make sure when we make our modifications to this cabinet that it's exactly no further than 90 inches from the floor to top. And what I want to make sure to do is let's go in and set the height and the width. So first of all, on the depth, let's change that to be 24 inches or refrigerator height. We'll leave the width at 46.5. That's the size of our refrigerator that we put in there, bounded by the partitions. And then on the height, I'm going to set that to be 6 inches. Now on the floor to top, let's go ahead and put our 90 inches in there. Press the tab key so you can get the preview update. And next on the face item, I'm actually just going to remove this altogether, and now I just have a blank area. And then I'm going to get rid of the light rail down below by going to the moldings panel, coming down to the second molding, and I'm just going to press the delete key. Now the final thing that I'll do in this view, I always leave my backsplash off the base cabinets and off of the wall cabinets. I use the built-in backsplash tool using the custom backsplash. Click on the wall. That way you can come in here and you can adjust this to whatever size that you need to in this case. And now we can go into the wall elevation and do our dimensions. From the plan view, the tool that you're looking for to just isolate the wall itself is the wall elevation tool. Click and drag through the wall. Now when you take a wall elevation, your typical camera style is going to be vector style. Sometimes I like to be a little bit more artistic and switch that style to the technical illustration. It gives you a slightly different view. Now I wanted to create the dimensions for this view, and what I want to make sure is, one, my dimension defaults are set to the NKBA dimension defaults. That's an out-of-the-box dimension default, and that's one I want to make sure when I use the next tool, which is for the automatic NKBA elevation dimensions. And this is going to do a pretty good job of placing our dimensions. Notice that at the top 263 1/4 does not match the number that we put in from the floor plan. If you go back to the floor plan, it's actually 256, and the reason is because we removed and made this wall invisible. And that's okay for the purposes of this video, but if you're trying to be exact for your wall elevation and they don't match, and you've done what I've done here in setting that wall to be invisible, it's going to the outside of that wall in this elevation that we just created. Now typically with the automatic dimensions that we just placed, I usually do clean up to these and make modifications to them. And I'll do this in a circular method where I'll start on the left, move around to the top, the sides, and the bottom. And the way I usually do this is I'll click on the dimension, and if some of these dimensions are not relevant for what you want, you can go through and each one of these, if we zoom in a little bit, each one of these dimensions will show up with an indicator by showing this little diamond of where they're at. And you can easily just grab these diamonds and pull them off if there are certain things that you don't want. So I'm just going to go through here and I'm going to pull these little dimension markers off, and I just don't need this level of detail for this side. So notice that it actually went to the oven. Sometimes you have to pull it off to the side. I'm going to go ahead and slide these off, and we come up to the upper portion. Again, it picked up the window on the side. I don't want that. And I've been able to clean up the side based on what I need. Notice that the default cabinet that I'm using is 34 inches in height. Again, if you look at the access standard, typically your countertop is not recommended to be in excess of 34 inches. Come around the top. Remember when we copied that cabinet around, we actually have the same dimension at 4 7/8. I'm going to delete this center line since it's going to be repeated at the bottom, and then I'll just go ahead and pull this dimension down. And let's come into the bottom and take a look. So there's our center line dimensions that we need, and then off to the far side, if you want to clean this dimension up to be a little bit different, you can use the same approach that I used on the other side. Now as I get ready to place the island, one of the things that's really important about your island is to make sure you have the accessibility and the knee clearance, just like with the sink. And if we zoom into the layout down here that we've created, I've used this accessible standard. Again, recommended height should not exceed the 34 inches according to the National Kitchen and Bath Association. And then the clearance down here needs to be in the 27-inch range. You can see the 3D rendering of the island that we used. Again, that'll be under a separate video that we create this island. And what I've done here is I placed this island actually using an induction cooktop according to the manufacturer. Shielding underneath of this is typically not required. They suggest a ventilation through the back part. Let's go ahead and place this island as an architectural block. I'm going to do a separate video to show you the process of creating the island. We'll place it into the design here and we'll dimension it. So let's go back into the floor plan view and go through those steps. Now I've created a folder for accessibility items that I'm using for this video called Accessibility. You can see the island that I've already created and blocked down here, and I'm just going to grab that and I'm going to place it into the design over here. As I place that island as an architectural block, I usually explode those blocks down here in the lower edit menu to give more refined control over being able to dimension to it. Now I'm going to use my end-to-end dimension, and I'm going to come in here and I'm going to create a dimension to the countertop. And I may need to come in here and adjust that just slightly so I have my countertop to countertop edge. And then I'm going to draw a marquee around the entire island. And in this case, I'm going to use that dimension and I'm going to put in 60 inches. And I'll just go ahead and expand this dimension. Let's go ahead and use the extra diamond. We'll pick that up on the edge over here. And then I'm going to run another end-to-end dimension from the wall over to the countertop. And then we'll add one more dimension to the end of the countertop. And again, I want to draw a marquee around the island, and then I'm going to set this dimension to 60 inches as well, and then I can adjust these dimensions where I'd like to have them in the plan view. So let's just go ahead and slide this out off to the side over here. Now I have the dimensions, and the next thing I want to do is to create an elevation view for my island. And oftentimes when you do, let's say, a wall elevation, let's go ahead and cut a wall elevation just through the island here. The wall elevation is actually looking for walls, so you're going to see the wall behind the island. If you want to backclip that, you can edit the camera either in the plan view or in the 3D view. Let's click on this tool in the upper section called Edit Active Camera, and the first thing I'm going to do is let's go ahead and call it the Island Elevation tool, and then there's a setting right down here that says Backclip. And let's go ahead and check that. By default, it's going to be the distance you drew the camera. And then in the plan display, let's go ahead and rename that to Camera B. What that's going to do is that's going to reset your camera so you don't see the wall behind it, and it's a very clean look, and now you can do your dimensioning in this elevation view. Like I did on the main wall elevation, I'm going to change my camera to the technical illustration style, give us a little bit more color. The automatic NKBA dimension tool will not work without a wall in this case, so I'm going to need to use my manual dimension tools. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to use the end-to-end dimension, and I'm going to come in here and create an end-to-end dimension. Notice that it's only going to pick up the center of that leg, so I'm just going to slide that out to the end of the countertop, and we'll also slide it out to the end of the countertop, and now I have my end-to-end at the 103 that you saw in the plan view. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to switch my dimension tool to the center line, and specifically I have a dimension default for appliance center lines. And if you were to explore this dimension default, let's go in and take a look at my settings in here. So I'm going to go into my dimension defaults, and let's take a look at this dimension default for center lines. So underneath my dimension defaults, if you take a look and go onto the edit panel, I have a specific dimension that's only looking for center lines down here, centers, and that's the only thing checked really in this locate option besides my wall surfaces. When I use this dimension default, and now when I run this center line, we can come through here, pick up the center line. It's also going to pick up the center line of the millwork. Let's go ahead and pull that off and actually put it onto the end of the countertop. And I'll do the same thing on the other side. That'll give me the center line for that appliance. And clearly if you're going to be going to the outside of the wall and showing that, you could drag that dimension onto the wall itself. Once I'm finished with the center line, let's just change this back to the regular manual dimension tool and also back to our dimension default for the NKBA. And I have quite a few components in here with a custom leg in here that's actually made out of CAD. I'm actually going to just run a few dimensions in here. It's going to be a little bit easier to clean this up by selecting this dimension. We'll pull it down, and then we'll just simply add and subtract. It picks up the center of the legs. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and just add the dimension. So it's picking up a few of these items in here, and I'm just going to pull these off and clean them up. So with the extra diamond on here, I'm going to slide this over to the edge on this point right here. I'm going to pick up those feet, so we'll just put the dimension over here, and one more on the foot over here. And then I'll probably come in here, let's zoom in and figure out what we're going to. I'm going to pull that right onto the leg, and each time you click on this it gives you an extra diamond. I have a extra 1/2 inch for the reveal on the door panel, and then we'll go ahead and pull this over to the edge of the foot and also onto the edge of the countertop. There's a lot going on with the dimensions in here, so I like to usually click on these and pull these dimensions off so they're readable. These are a little move handle right in this area right here. I'm just going to pull my center line dimension down so you can take a peek and get it cleaned up. So once I have the dimensions put in place here, I can now send this out to the layout sheet, which if I open that up you can take a look at it here. And you can see I added dimensions actually going in the vertical direction over to the pendant light. I just drew a CAD line in here so I could get my dimension for that light. And then I put a text object in here for the information on the ventilation and the cook type for that induction cooktop. And if I zoom out, you can take a look at the entire set of plans that I put together for this kitchen, the wall elevation down in the lower left-hand corner, my accessibility standards, and then the floor plan. And then I've created the entire sheet on a 24 by 36. And we go back into the plan view and let's take a 3D overview. You can see the final plan where I put the wheelchair in here. You can see the accessibility underneath of the island, underneath of the sink. And again, being able to use the invisible walls allows you to see the entire scene. Well, that's it for this video. If you want to watch the video on creating the island or the video on creating the sink, those are available as accessible sink and accessible island. And thanks for watching the video and have a great day.